Your Unit 1 summative, which will be S1.2, will be worth 100 points. There are going to be 16 algebraic questions, so 16 things you have to actually work on, and then 8 vocabulary matching questions. These are all the topics. You're going to have to make sure that you can write algebraic expressions in words, solve absolute values, and identify when they have no solution. Evaluate expressions by substituting. Find the value of an expression by given an equation that you have to actually solve for first. Solve equations, which basically includes the proportion equations, equations with distribution, equations with fractions, multiple step equations, all of those. Solving literal equations, which are the ones that have several variables and you don't potentially get an answer, you just get another equation. And finding the unit rate of something. For the questions that you are going to have to be able to write expressions for, it will be important that you understand when it is multiplication and when it is division and adding and subtracting. This question, Sarah drives 55 miles per hour for h hours. The expression is 55h because that is basically 55 miles multiplied by the number of hours. Number 2 is asking you for the expression for the 9 and n being added together. So you could say n more than 9. You could say the sum of 9 and n. You could say the 9 added to n. But this is the one that is the answer for the correct multiple choice. Number 3. M plus n gives you 9. Evaluating the expression given the values, you're just plugging it in. Number 4, to undo, you add 7 and you get x is equal to 32. And you could check your work by doing 32 minus 7 and you get 25, and so you know that it's correct. Number 5, you're going to subtract 22 from both sides. 4 minus 2, 5 minus 2, a is equal to 32. Which equation represents the relationship 3 more than a number is 7? So you're adding 3 to a number, and it gives you 7. That would be this one right here. Solve for m. You're going to divide by -8 to both sides, and you are going to get that m is equal to -6. And check your work. -8 times -6 is positive 48, so you know it's correct. Here you're dividing by 7, so you're going to multiply by 7 to undo. H is 42. And check your work. 42 divided by 7 is 6, and that's correct. Number 9 is a proportion, but it is also an equation because there's an equal sign. So you are going to cross multiply, remembering that when you multiply 2 to x plus 8, you're really multiplying 2 to the entire x plus 8. And 3 times 24, which is 72. You distribute and you get 2x plus 16 is equal to 72. Minus 16 on both sides. 2x is equal to 56. You're going to divide by 2. And you get x is equal to 28. And you can check your work. 28 plus 8 is 36. This is telling you that 36 over 24 is equal to 3 over 2. And in reality, if you were to simplify this by dividing by 12, you would get 3 over 2. So 3 over 2 is equal to 3 over 2. You know that you got the correct answer. We're going to distribute first. You get 2z plus 2 is equal to 16. Undo what's being done. You're going to minus 2 to both sides. And you get 2z is equal to 14. Divide by 2 on both sides. And you get that z is equal to 7. Check your work. 7 plus 1 is 8. 2 times 8 is 16, so you know it's correct. with this question here, dotted line to separate both sides, you're undoing in reverse order. So if you were to divide by 3 and then subtract 9, to undo it, you're going to add 9 to both sides. First, you get d divided by 3 is equal to negative 3. And now you're going to multiply by 3 to undo this division. And you get d is equal to negative 9. Check your work. Negative 9 divided by 3 is negative 3, and negative 3 minus 9 is negative 12, so you know it's correct. Number 12, dotted line. You want to get all of your a's together, and you can either, remember there's more than one way to do this. If you wanted to keep a positive, you can minus a here and make this 2a. Minus 8 equals 6, and then you can add 8 to both sides, and you get 14 is equal to 2a. Then you divide by 2, and you get a is equal to 7. Or the other way you could have done it was to look at it from the very beginning. If you wanted to, instead of subtract a, let's say you wanted to bring the 3a over here, you just have to be careful because it means 1a minus 3a is negative 2a plus 6 is equal to negative 8. From there, you would have minus 6, and you would have gotten negative 2a is equal to negative 14. Divide by negative 2, and you still would have gotten a is equal to 7. And again, you could check your work. 7 plus 6 is 13. Is 13 equal to 3 times 7 is 21. 21 minus 8 is 13. Yes, it is. Distribute first, and you get 6x minus 6 is equal to 6x minus 1. At this point, you might say to yourself, how can you take 6 away from 6x and take 1 away from 6x and it be the same thing? This is no solution. But if you were in the middle of solving it and you followed your steps like normal, let's say you add 6, you would have gotten 6x is equal to 6x plus 5. At this point, you might have said no solution. Or you might have continued, and you would have gotten 0 is equal to 5, which is not a true statement, and that's the reason to why it's no solution. Absolute value. Remember the 3 steps for absolute value. Step 1 is to isolate the absolute value part. Step 2 is to ask yourself, is that absolute value equal to a positive? If yes, you go to 3. If no, it's called no solution. Then if it is positive, you set up the inside absolute value equal to the positive, and you set it equal to the negative, and you solve. So let's look at this first question. In this question, step 1 is to isolate the absolute value. So when we look at this, we have to figure out how can we get the absolute value part alone. You're going to minus 15 first. You get 4 times the absolute value of x minus 2 is equal to negative 3. Oh no, it looks like it's equal to a negative. Divide by 4. Yeah, the absolute value of x minus 2 is equal to negative 3/4. It is not equal to a positive. It is equal to a negative, so this is no solution. No need to continue the work at that point. You can't. Solving literal equations. We're solving for y. So I always circle or make a note of what it is that I am solving for. In this case, you're treating it in the same way that you would when you're solving an equation regularly. The difference is that you're not going to get an actual answer. So when you look at this, the equation that you have is 2y plus w is equal to x, and we are solving for y. Dotted line down the equal sign. Trying to get y by itself, so you're going to subtract w from both sides. You get 2y is equal to x minus w. Now you're going to divide everything by 2, and you get y is equal to x minus w all divided by 2, and that's the transformed equation. Okay, number 16. Words, don't freak out. Read it, tell yourself a story. Nina can braid 4 feet of rope in 1 hour. What is her speed in feet per hour? This is unit rate. Unit rate is how much for 1. So if she can go 4 feet per hour, that means that her unit rate is 4 feet per hour. If I change this and I said, Nina can braid, okay, so this is a separate question that I'm giving you right now, at 12 feet in 4 hours, what is her unit rate? Then you would ask yourself, okay, well, if she's doing 12 feet in 4 hours, that's really 3 feet per hour. Very straightforward. Unit rate is basically just division. It's just trying to figure out how much for 1. So that's not a tricky question at all. Okay. More proportions. Cross multiply, remembering you're multiplying to the entire binomial f of x minus 2 is equal to 50. A couple things you can do. You can either distribute first and then divide, or you can look at it and ask yourself, well, if the entire x minus 2 is being multiplied by 3 and I'm trying to get x by itself, theoretically, I could divide everything by 3. Now, that doesn't divide equally, so you can go ahead, hopefully, think beyond where you're going, and just distribute for now, because that is the way that you guys have been used to it. Solve like normal. 3x is equal to 56. In order to get x by itself, I am going to divide by 3. And so when you divide by 3 on both sides, you get that x is equal to 56 divided by 3, which, remember, bring your calculators, because if you have that ability of changing it to a fraction on the calculator or dividing it out, this is actually, if it divides out, it's going to give you 18.6 repeating, but what I'd like for you to do is just leave it as 56 thirds. 56 is not divisible by 3 evenly, so you're just going to leave it as 56 over 3. Remember to leave it as a fraction. There's no need for you to divide it out. Another absolute value. Step 1, isolate the absolute value. That one's already isolated. Step 2, is the absolute value part equal to a positive? Yes, it is. It's equal to positive 12. Therefore, if yes, go to step 3. Set up the absolute value as whatever's on the inside is equal to the positive, so that's x minus 7 is equal to positive 12, and the absolute value is equal to the negative. So the other part would be that the x minus 7 is equal to negative 12. Solve each independently. You get that x is equal to 19 for this one. Add 7 to both sides. You get that x is equal to negative 5. Your solution is x is equal to 19 and x is negative 5. You could write it like this on the test, or you could write it the way that I showed you before, or you could say 19 or -5. Either one is correct. Okay. Solving with an equation that has fraction. Remember that when you are multiplying by a variable, to undo it, you multiply by its reciprocal. So you're going to multiply this side by -7/3. You don't change the sign when you're multiplying. The purpose of doing this is that this divides away, leaving you with 1 times h, which is just h. And then when you multiply 6 by 7/3 negative, remember the denominator is 1 of the 6, and you're allowed to cross divide. So you could say 3 goes into itself once, and 3 goes into 6 twice. 2 times -7 is -14 over 1 times 1, which is just 1, so that's -14. The long way, for those of you guys that are forgetting, this would give you -42 because you multiply across, and this would give you 3, and -42 divided by 3 is -14. Another problem we have to translate into math. The quotient, that means division, of n and -4, n divided by -4, means equals 8. What is the value? So there's your expression. To solve, you multiply by -4 on both sides, and you get that n is equal to -32. More equations that have fractions. Step 1, remember, you want to get a least common denominator so that you can destroy it, because the denominator is the same as division, and if you multiply the whole equation, you're basically undoing the division. So let's multiply this by 7 over 7. So we have d over 14 minus 7 over 14 equals 1 over 14. Now what I'm going to do is multiply the entire equation by 14, which typically just does the destroying of the denominator. You're left with d minus 7 is equal to 1, because the denominators were undivided, you multiplied. Add 7 to both sides, d is equal to 8. And that's your answer. Okay. Probably a couple of you guys can see the answer to this one already. Distribute, and you get 7x minus 14 is equal to 7x minus 14. It's equal to itself. That's called identity, or all reals, or infinite. Any of those would be correct. If you forgot and you were just in the process of solving and you did this and you kept on going, you would get 7x is 7x, which is identity. Another literal. Solving for y. So we have x times y, which I'm solving for, plus 7 is equal to n. Well, first I have to try to isolate y. You get x, y is equal to n minus 7. Then in order to get y by itself, I have to divide the whole thing by x. That is going to just leave me with y equals n minus 7 over x. Great. And the vocab. Make sure you can match these. These are going to be multiple choice, and you're going to have to find the answer. Remember, a coefficient is the number in front of the variable. It's being multiplied. For example, 5x, the 5. Or if it was negative 5x, it would be negative 5. The constant is the number with no variables in an expression. So, for example, if I gave you 5x minus 3, the constant is negative 3. Evaluate means find the value of. A variable is the unknown quantity represented by a letter, the x or the y, and so on. An equation is an expression with an equal sign. 5 plus x minus 3 equals 7 is an equation because it has the equal sign. A literal equation is an equation with more than one variable or multiple variables. Identity, all real numbers, means that the answer is equal to itself. There's solutions, infinite solutions, because it's the same equation. No solution is when you cannot solve because you get a false statement when solving. A proportion is the equality of two fractions. It's basically two fractions equal to each other. It's an equation where two fractions are set up equal to each other, and in order to solve, you cross multiply. Unit rate is the rate for one item.